Hello and welcome to UKEdChat After Hours. I'm Martin. I'm one of the people who keeps the tweets keep flowing at UKEdChat on Twitter and also on the website. You can find out more about me at ICT Magic on Twitter. If you want to find out more about UKEdChat, you can go to UKEdChat.com or on pretty much any platform, just search for UKEdChat. So we've got a really interesting topic, which I'm fascinated to find out more about because it's not something which I specialize in, so I'm really interested. And actually, for researching this session, I've actually found out a lot already, so I want to really cream as much information as I can from my guest today. So can I ask who you are and what are we discussing?
Hi, my name is Abby Mann. We're discussing pupil wellbeing, specifically because I wrote a book about it recently. This is it. It's called Live Well, Learn Well, and it contains lots of ideas, practical ideas to help support student wellbeing in schools.
Okay, and where can people find you online if they want to find out more
you
about
can find me on Twitter as Abby Mann, so it's ABBIEMANN 1982 at Abby Mann 1982.
Okay, super. And any links that we share in this session we'll put into the show notes. So the only link you should need to go to will be on the UKEdChat.com website or wherever you find this presentation. So we should also mention the fact that you have written a book previously, which I also have with me. So maybe my first question should be, how did the writing experience or maybe the content of the book change from your first book to your second book?
So with the first book, it's called Live Well, Teach Well. So the clue's in the title. That's all about teacher wellbeing and how to support teachers and support your own wellbeing in a school environment. And crazily, after I'd written the first one, I thought it would be a good idea, knowing how much hard work had gone into the first one, if I were to do a second book, which was focused on pupil wellbeing. So a lot of the chapters mirror the chapters that exist in the previous book, but the focus is switched to pupils specifically.
Mm-hmm. And just to say that the book is based on a structure of different ideas. So I'm sure many people are familiar with the Bloomsbury 100 Ideas series of books. I've got one myself. Check out the coding version for primary schools. That's my book. It's quite a well-known series now. So, but it was quite interesting to me looking at the books over the last couple of days that there's not actually a lot of overlap between the two books. So is that because you think that well-being is quite different between the teaching profession or possibly just adults compared to the students or younger people? Is there a difference, would you say?
I think you need to take a slightly different approach with young people. Obviously, we have in our classrooms, we have to teach content and ensure that they are focused on that. But I don't know, I thought there was quite a lot of overlap with some of the chapters. So maybe I need to take a second look at that. But I do think some of the chapters are slightly different just because you're dealing with children and not adults, and there's a lot more of them. So the approaches need to be slightly different in that sense.
Yeah, and also I think if you're looking at the adult version of the book, that's probably more for yourself rather than doing it unto other people. So obviously there's an element.
That's right. Yeah, I mean both books. Yeah, so both books have a chapter which is focusing on your personal well-being, and then the second chapter moves on in both books to looking at how you can recognise the efforts of others and the practice and art of gratitude and so on. So they're similar in that sense, but yes, the approach that's taken within them might differ slightly because you're working with two different sets of people there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you write in your book that students in today's education system are feeling the pressure. So can you maybe unpack that a bit, and what is the problem as you see it? And in the current situation of the pandemic, is that perhaps something which has exacerbated the situation?
Of course, yeah. I mean, no doubt it's exacerbated it. I think when I was writing the book, I was mainly thinking perhaps from a secondary perspective, because I'm an English teacher and assistant head at a secondary school. And I was thinking about the exam system and the structure that we have in place, and and the quite recent changes that we've had to the exam system, such as the coursework being removed and the content becoming a lot heavier, and skills from A level being shifted down into the GCSE specifications, and the fact that there's closed book tech exams now, so you're not allowed to have the books in there. And I'm not saying that all of those changes are terrible or the wrong thing, but students need to adapt their thinking to that. And so the pressure comes from those sort of government changes, and it filters down to our students if we're not careful and we don't actually focus on keeping them very calm and controlled in the classroom environment so that they can learn. But those pressures, we have social media now, so you can't hide those things from them. And on that note as well, with external pressures and social media, they've got this thing that we didn't have when we were younger, which is this constant access to content that we don't want them to see. So they end up with body image issues, confidence issues, relationship issues, and these are all the pressures that we just didn't have as young people. So you have that. And then with regards to the pandemic, I imagine the stress and worry about the exams and what might happen now because of the changes can only have heightened for them. And they, in addition to that, they've lost their socialization. So ironically now, they only have their social media as a way to communicate, and what damage is that doing to them? And yeah, we all know that the mental health concerns are going to be quite bad over the next year or two. We're going to see that emerging with our students. I think I was looking at the World Health Organization the other day, and it said that half of all mental health conditions start at the age of 14, but they go undetected. And how are we going to manage that as teachers? What are we doing with regard to the mental health of our students when they return to school, and what are we doing now as well? So definitely the pandemic will have exacerbated some of the already common pressure points for young people.
Okay, so teachers are obviously not health professionals, but there is obviously a duty of care to ensure that they're kept safe, and as well as we can do within our own settings. But what is the role of a teacher in supporting wellbeing? And perhaps you can also touch upon the mental health side of things as well.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, isn't it? Depending on who you ask and what their belief of the role of a teacher is. But I firmly believe that we do have a duty of care to the well-being of young people. And I mean, if you put yourself in the position of a young person who is very, very stressed and very worried about something, and then you place yourself as that young person into a classroom and ask them to learn about whatever it is you want to teach them that day, it's impossible for them to be able to concentrate. So we have a responsibility to their well-being because we want them to be successful in learning, but also because they're people as well, and that's what you go into teaching for. So I think we have a responsibility to build relationships with students so that they do feel safe, and the environment that you set up for them in your classroom is one in which they can flourish and be successful as learners in. And they're two sides of the same coin, really, which is something that Martin Rea says all the time with regards to staff and student wellbeing. But I'm stealing it now to talk about learning and wellbeing. But it's definitely something that goes hand in hand. You can't expect students to learn and be successful in your classroom if they're not feeling good in themselves in that environment. And I think that's what I'm talking about when I talk about student wellbeing and the responsibility of teachers towards that.
Okay, and it should also be mentioned about Martin's 5 a day, what do you call it, a program, but a certain initiative that is very popular online and also elsewhere, and I know you're a bit of a fan of that. So one of the ideas that caught my eye was the idea of modelling behaviour. Now, as a primary school teacher myself, I feel that modelling behaviour is something which we do all the time in the classroom, because we have our own set of children almost constantly. Even when you're on PPA, they still come and find you. But how does that maybe work in a secondary school setting? Is there maybe do you have to more go out of your way to make sure that that's something which is seen? Because in primary school, you eat your lunch with your class, you do your sports with your class, you have your coffee as they have their snack with your class. I can imagine that'd be quite different to secondary. So maybe you can expand on that a little.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about the primary perspective of that. Actually, I always think a good sign of a school when you visit a school is watching how the students behave, and I always think it's a really nice place when students are holding doors open for you and saying please and thank you, and something must have been nurtured, you know, in that environment for everybody to be demonstrating those sort of manners within a community, and I think it is the same in secondary school in that it's that you all have to play that part of role modeling the behavior that you want to see. So in terms of the community, you will be holding the door open, you will be saying thank you, you'll be greeting them at the door, you'll be picking up the litter that you see in the corridor, you will be praising them at every opportunity for the hard work and effort that they've put in, you'll be thanking them for something that they've done. There's just the small little micro events that take place day to day in a school that I think if you don't model, then it's very clear that students haven't picked up on that. And I think it's very clear when you walk into a school, you can tell that environment is a positive space for students. So it's those little things. And then also with regard to well-being, emotional literacy, I think, is really key as well. I think kind of toxic positivity can be quite damaging as much as negative thoughts can. And I think dealing with your emotions effectively and showing a student how you deal with those emotions effectively can have an enormous impact on the way that they deal with their emotions. And, you know, showing them that it's okay to feel a certain way and acknowledging that they're feeling like that is really key in schools as well. So yeah, that kind of thing. And then in the classroom as well, the modeling of the learning is really key. So, you know, I don't ask students to do anything that I wouldn't model myself first. So again, it's about both elements of your role as a teacher, the well-being and sort of social emotional side, but also the success that they have in the classroom, because the more successful they are, the more successful they are. So you have those two sides of it really, and I think you can definitely tell when you're in a school where those things exist.
So you've touched upon maybe behavioural routines and things like that in school, but what about maybe things which are a bit wider in society? So could you model perhaps the idea of environmentalism within the school? You touched upon picking up litter, but could that maybe go further? Could you show support for some of the more wider social issues, which especially last year we saw many protests in many different guises last year? Is that something which teachers should feel like they could be involved with, or do they need to keep a political distance from such?
That's a really good question. I think you know, as model citizens, we have a responsibility to talk about issues that affect the everyday world. So environmentalism might be something that I would bring into my lesson, for example, by looking at a non-fiction article on the very issue. We have a fantastic PSHE director of learning who encapsulates all of those issues really into his curriculum, but also we have lots and lots of clubs and extracurricular activities that are just the heart of schools sometimes. When we came back after the first lockdown, it was lessons only, and you could really tell the difference between the environment, the school environment and the school day, because of the absence of those really key important clubs. And especially at the end of the day, I would often see so many students hanging around after school, and you'd see them there at 5 p.m. and you'd be like, go home, but they just want to stay and they want to be in those clubs. And when we did the surveys with them, the wellbeing surveys, when we first went back, that was the first thing that they all said, is that we miss the clubs, we want those things. So I do think there's a responsibility to sort of look at the wider issues in society, and you don't have to be political to do that. You can keep a neutral stance, and that's, I hope, what people do. So yeah, I think they're really key.
So you mentioned about students without homes to go to. Well, how do you maybe involve the adults at home, this kind of building up of well-being and ensuring everything is also okay at home? How do you harness the support of parents in the development of well-being? How do you get them on board?
Yeah, I mean, before COVID and before this strange world that we're living in, I could have answered that question really well, and I think I would have said things like effective communication and bringing them into the community, and volunteer parents, volunteer readers. They can come in on school fete days, inviting them into the concerts, and encouraging them to become as involved in the school community as possible. And I think certainly in secondary schools, tutors play a huge role in terms of getting the parents buy-in and getting them on board with any sort of initiatives that we're running at school. And we do that very well at school. One of the things I noticed during lockdown, one of the first things we decided as a leadership team was that we were going to call every student every week, just as a well-being check. And when we did the survey, from the students, that was one of the things, and the parents, that's one of the things that they really appreciated. Just that call to check that everybody was okay. And I think it's those things that are really key in fostering good relationships with parents, particularly parents who have, perhaps there's some sort of intergenerational concerns where parents themselves have had a bad experience of school, and perhaps have passed that experience down onto their children unknowingly. I think that's really key to try and get those parents on board, and tutors are the key to that, because having one point of contact at school, somebody who you can build a trusting relationship with, is really, really important for those particular families. And just even things like how do you ensure that they're comfortable when they come into the school? What are you doing that relaxes or puts those particular parents at ease? And it might be something as simple as using your first name instead of your formal teacher name. So I would say mainly it's about effective communication and really, really bringing the parents into the school community as often as possible.
So do you think some of the skills and technologies that we're using now during lockdown could actually be quite useful to maybe break down some of those barriers? So some of the things that we're currently communicating with our students, could they maybe be used to communicate with parents or guardians who are maybe a little bit more reluctant to come into school for whatever reason that may be?
I think that's a good question. Yeah, I think that's definitely. I mean, we have had parents' evenings, virtual parents' evenings, but parent evenings, but they have been phone calls rather than the virtual system that I think some other schools have been using and utilising. But I've had a look on Twitter, and I've seen wonderful things. excuse me, about how people are really enjoying that particular type of communication with parents, and parents are equally enjoying it as well, because we all know it can be very difficult for parents to get to parents' evenings at the time that they begin. And this is just another sort of avenue to go down in terms of making things a little bit easier and more accessible for people. So I do think there's lots of things that the technology has provided for us that we perhaps wouldn't have utilised before. Even things as simple as having your lessons recorded has provided enormous support for our school community. Being able to send something to your team, watch the first 10 minutes of this, what do you think? That kind of sharing of teaching ideas and technology tricks, if you will, has really, really helped develop our school.
Okay, excellent. Right, changing tack a little bit. I have pre-warned you about picking a few ideas from your book, so I hope you've done your homework. So maybe share a couple of your favorite ideas from your latest book, just to explain how they can be utilized, and maybe what context they may also be utilized in as well. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, so when I was looking through the book, I thought about things that would be helpful for students now in our current sort of setting. And one of the key things that I have noticed myself in lockdown is that I absolutely need to be near nature. And it is something that I live in North London, so Zone 2, and I'm very close to Hampstead Heath. I'm about a mile away. And if that place had not existed during that time, I would have really struggled with not being near some sort of nature. And one of the things I noticed about the pupils that I work with at Whitefield School, which is where I'm at now, is that they don't appreciate nature in the way that I perhaps do. I grew up in a very small village, so I was surrounded by this kind of environment. And I'll never forget, one of the students said to me as I was touring the school, "Are you from the countryside?" And I said, "I am." And she said, "Have you seen a horse?" And it just really overwhelmed me. And I thought, my God, what is going on here? And the school is 2 miles away from Hampstead Heath. So when I was doing an assembly on adventure and a spirit of adventure, I talked to them about getting out and exploring more of your local area. And I asked the whole of Year 8 to raise their hand if they'd ever been to Hampstead Heath. And there were about 130 pupils in the room. And I think about five of them raised their hand. And I just could not believe the kind of lack of outdoor pursuits and activities that they had been missing. So my top tip for them is actually to utilize nature. They can't do anything else right now. They can't, go shopping. They can't hang out at the cinema. I really think they should be getting outside and enjoying their local area. So I think there's a couple of ideas actually in the book about nature being very powerful. Doctors prescribe it now for people with depression. It's something that has had evidenced success with making people feel good. And there's just something about that fresh air and that feeling of success when you've been on a long hike somewhere that I think they could be experiencing. So I've really been pushing in the school newsletter, local walks and getting outside with your family and just enjoying your local area. Perhaps parents doing a little treasure hunt with them or something, but yeah, nature definitely. And we have a step challenge going on at the moment at our school. Every week we are aiming to do as many walks or runs on an app, and we are aiming to collectively reach some of our twinned towns over in Europe mainland. So that's been getting a lot of us young people out and active. So yeah, definitely getting outside and nature as a healer. And then I also have lots in there about the power of thank you and the importance of gratitude as well. So we've been doing lots of things with our pupils with regard to that. So they are being encouraged by their tutors to send e-cards to their teachers if they think they've had a particularly good week with the teacher, and to also thank their parents as well, because we all know what kind of environment the parents are in at the moment with their working from home and also then trying to teach and help their children. So we've been focusing on a lot of that, and also we've been doing an awful lot of praise, sending postcards home ourselves, and the phone calls are still happening once a fortnight. So there's a lot of sort of gratitude going on to try and detract from what can perhaps be quite a worrying time. And then finally, we've been working with them on creating kind of stress-free zones in their house. So we know that their living environment is perhaps a little bit different to what we might have in our own homes. And so one of my colleagues actually wrote an idea in the book about a stress-free bedroom. Her name's Rebecca Aylwin, and she talked about having light in the morning, because we all know teenagers like to live in the dark. So getting those curtains open, letting the light in, having a tidy workspace where possible, and also back to nature, having something in your house that is like something that you could nurture, a plant, some flowers, anything that they could be doing with their time inside the house that also creates a nice calm environment for working.
That sounds fantastic. Lots of nature and
lots of nature.
Again, at the primary school, I know that whenever we do anything when it comes to growing, so we've grown sunflowers and we've grown potatoes in a potato patch, and it's always something which children remember all the way through school. So you teach year 1, and at year 6 they still remember it, and I'm sure beyond. So there are lots of really fantastic ideas that could be really quite simple to do, but is there maybe one piece of advice that you'd give to teachers who are just starting out, who want to really focus on well-being from now on for the next couple of months? Is there maybe one thing that you would say?
Yeah, I would definitely say check out Teacher 5 a Day and Martin Ria. He is wonderful. He set up Teacher 5 a Day as a sort of program or project some years ago now. I think perhaps 2015, maybe a year earlier. And it's been running on Twitter, and it's really blown up over the last few years. They look at 5 areas of sort of developing your well-being and just being mindful of it. One is notice. 2 is learn. So what are you learning that's new? Exercise, of course, and connecting with others, and then volunteering as well. But if people go on Twitter and just type in Teacher 5 a Day, they will be sort of bombarded with a wealth of ideas. And at the moment, Dr. Lucy Kelly is doing Reimagining the Diary, which is a project that is diary keeping as a positive tool for well-being, and that's proven really popular at the moment as well. So I think if you, I've written it down somewhere. No, I haven't. Dr. Lucy Kelly. Yeah, have a look on Twitter.
We'll make sure the links are in the show notes. But where can people find you if they want to find out anything more about you?
I don't have a website or anything. I'm just on Twitter. So yeah, it's at AbbyMan1982.
And again, that'll be in our show notes. Abby, that's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you for all of your inspiration. So just to make sure everybody's aware that there are 2 books from all good bookshops, of course. So I've been Martin. This has been UKEdChat After Hours. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.